Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Fantasy Baseball. I'm John Kuh, joined by Patrick Fitzgerald. In this episode, we're going to go over the latest news and notes around baseball, talk about a few pitchers and hitters that are either surging or struggling and what we think about their second half output, and then, of course, some streaming recommendations at the end of the show. But before we get into it, how was your All-Star break, Patrick?
Hey John, it's been good. I enjoyed, a few days, but there's no sports on right now basically. So I'm looking forward to the games getting back underway. How about you?
Yeah, kind of the same thing actually. I was like thinking yesterday. I'm like, there's absolutely nothing to watch on TV right now in terms of sports. I mean, there's some things that I'll be catching up on, but basically of the big four at least, there was nothing going on. Or five if you count soccer as well. So yeah, it's going to be nice to have baseball back starting tomorrow, Friday. And yeah, looking forward to this second half of the season, which is definitely shaping up to be super fun in terms of both real and fantasy baseball.
Yeah, I've been getting, like a little jittery, a little anxious just waiting for my fantasy teams to start playing again. So I got in the RotoWire Online Championship, I'm fifth at the All-Star break in the overall. So it's going to be
Oh
a
wow,
really fun, but kind of stressful, but it's fun, second half. So I'm haven't achieved anything yet, but it's cool to see my name up there for sure.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, in my home league, like I mentioned, playoffs started I guess 3 weeks ago now, and I got a first round bye, so I'm finally going to get started after basically taking like a 3 week break from fantasy baseball in that league to finally get started in the playoffs. And yeah, hoping I can stay alive until the finals. I've gotten second the last 2 years, and
Mhm.
this year I'm hoping to at least finish second again if possible. So
Got a
yeah,
breakthrough.
that's been kind of nerve wracking, just like having this long break and not knowing what to do. I mean, obviously, I'm participating in my other leagues, but this one's just a little bit more important because it's the home league.
Yeah, maybe once the rotations are locked in for next week, and while everybody else is still making ads for this week, you can plan things out and get a little bit of an edge.
Exactly. Yeah. That's kind of the hope to maybe make some crucial pickups the next couple days to make the team ready for that first match. Well, anyways, before we get into it, just a reminder you can follow our podcast on Twitter at ThisWeekPL. Send us your fantasy baseball questions to our email at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. Lastly, make sure you subscribe to or follow the podcast on whatever streaming platform you listen to. We're on all of them: Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you follow us and leave a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. All right, we are going to get into injury notes, and it's a little bit shorter. I think partially because with the All Star break, teams aren't necessarily giving up a ton of updates. Obviously, if anyone was injured, they're not going to get activated until Friday because there's no reason to activate them early off the injured list. But we still got a couple notable players to talk about. So, starting with some injury list placements, we're starting with Jake Berger of the Rangers. He's going on the injured list with a left quad strain. Lars Nootbaar of the Cardinals, he's got a left costochondral sprain. Basically, there's kind of a issue, I think, with where the muscles attaching to his ribs. I believe that's kind of the issue there. Connor Norby of the Marlins. Initially, it was diagnosed as left wrist inflammation, but turns out he's got actually a broken hamate bone in his hand. So it's going to be a little bit of a return for him from that. Hunter Dobbins, who we kind of mentioned in last week's episode, was kind of taking over Richard Fitz's place in the rotation. Unfortunately, tore his ACL on Friday. He's obviously out for season now. And as the corresponding move, Richard Fitz is back now in the rotation in Boston. And then finally, Michael Lorenzen of the Royals, I should say. He's got a left oblique strain. Don't love those for any baseball players. But yeah, he's probably going to be out for a few weeks. So no one's super notable. I don't think any of these guys were necessarily players that you would be having starting on a team in like a 12 teamer, or maybe some 50 teamers. You'd start some of these guys, but yeah, still some important injuries to keep track of.
Yeah, and I was looking at, the fallout who might gain from these guys going down. I don't really think there's anything that's too relevant, at least on the hitting side for our shallower leagues. The Red Sox rotation thing, one guy going down, it's a big logjam already, so that does make it a little bit more straightforward. Hopefully Fitz sticks in the rotation. You also have Tanner Houck working his way back. Walker Bueller's been the worst of the bunch, so maybe he loses his spot, but it's still a little bit murky. And then the Royals, Rich Hill could be back in the MLB. He's been pitching in AAA, so they need a fifth starter. Maybe he'll be the guy. That'd be pretty fun.
it's a little incredible, but also completely believable. I believe with Rich Hill, he had an out in his contract with the Royals, where like if any team offered him a major league spot, the Royals had to give him an out. Obviously, he's what 43 now or something, 44.
Yeah, he may be 45. It's crazy.
Yeah, so it's not surprising, but it is a little surprising that no team was just like, oh, Richard's like still pitching in AAA. Maybe we'll give him a shot. So, yeah, if he finally gets a shot this season with the Royals, that'd be pretty incredible.
Mhm.
All right, some returns from the injury list. All these happened last weekend, so none of this is really big news at this point. But Ivan Herrera is back with the Cardinals after dealing with a left hamstring strain. Luis Urias of the Athletics is back after dealing with a right hamstring strain. Shamanai came back, started on Sunday. It was a little bit of an abbreviated start with Clay Holmes piggybacking off him, but he pitched 3.1 innings, 5 hit, 1 run, 7 strikeouts, no walks. Any thoughts on this Shamanai start? Is this one where you'd be going out to grab him, or would you hesitate still a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the line was good. I think his velo is up a little bit from last year. Remains to be seen, if that carries over in a larger pitch count. But I think you got to go get him. I mean, he was one of the best starting pitchers in the second half last season because of that, arm slot adjustment that he made. So I think you gotta grab him right away. Doesn't mean you need to start him right away, but it's nice that he already got one outing under his belt. So yeah, I think you run and grab him and hopefully don't look back.
Yeah. Jake Fraley of the Reds coming back from a shoulder strain. He's going to be really a strong side platoon bat, but not much else beyond that for Cincinnati. In terms of some other news, Sal Frelick of the Brewers currently dealing with a grade 1 strain of his hamstring, so he's day to day. Would not be surprised if he makes a trip to the injured list just for the minimum time, just to allow the Brewers to call someone up, but we'll see how he's dealing with that. Blake Trinan of the Dodgers, he is nearing a return after a rehab appearance on Tuesday. We'll be able to help out that bullpen in Los Angeles. Blake Snell, also of the Dodgers, pitched 3 innings and 7 strikeouts in his most recent rehab start. Probably would expect at least 1 or 2 more rehab starts from him before we see him in the majors. John Gray of the Rangers also went 3 innings in his most recent rehab start. Also expect 1 to 2 more starts for him before he comes back. Kybert Reese, who is currently on the concussion IL, did start hitting off a tee, but still no timetable for his return. Dal- uh, Dalton Varsho of the Blue Jays, he was supposed to start his rehab assignment on Monday, has not started it yet, so a little bit of a setback for him in his return from injury. Alek Manoah, remember him? He threw 22 pitches in his most recent rehab start. It's been over a year since he's started in the majors. I think it's still maybe a long shot that he even shows up in the majors this season, but nice to see some signs of life from Manoah. Cade Povich of the Orioles, he had 3 innings in his most recent rehab start. Of course, for him, there's a little bit of a logjam in the Baltimore rotation right now, and so specifically with our next guy, Zach Eflin, he just threw 58 pitches and 4 innings in his most recent rehab start. So with him coming back, it's kind of unsure whether Povich, once he's healthy, would make it into the Baltimore rotation. Jeremy Pena of the Astros, he's started some light hitting, fielding, and running, but his return is still not necessarily imminent. And then Zebby Matthews of the Twins, he could return on Saturday. He threw 56 pitches in 4 innings, and currently the starter for the Twins is still listed as to be announced for Friday. Sawyer Gibson Long of the Tigers, 4.2 innings, 59 pitches in his most recent rehab start. And Spencer Arrighetti could finally start a minor league rehab assignment soon. Of course, he got hit in the thumb during BP, basically suffered a broken thumb, and he's been out ever since. He could be back within 3 weeks, is kind of what the Astros are saying.
Yeah. Orioles rotation definitely unclear. They kind of have 5 mediocre guys right now, basically. So there's not like a clear odd man out. And Trevor Rogers, I guess it would be unfair to call him mediocre. He's earned his spot. So Eflin will definitely be back in. Povich, I think he might just stay in AAA for a while. And then Zebby, would be nice to see him back. I know he looked really good in his rehab. I'm hoping, that the last couple of months, his stuff finally starts to translate to major league results. I definitely believe in it, but I know it's been really ugly the last 2 years. So people might be writing him off, but I think it's worth a stash.
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing with Zebby is just he has incredibly low walk numbers in the minors, and then as soon as he comes to the majors, the walks shoot up. So, yeah, hopefully the he can kind of develop that major league command and be able to control that strike zone a little bit more.
Yeah, I think he might like just not have that true like swing and miss pitch. He has like four solid offerings, but it just doesn't seem like maybe it's the fastball right up in the zone, but it doesn't seem like he has like an off speed pitch that's kind of his go to. So maybe he's just struggling to get guys out.
Yeah. In terms of some other news, Zach Geloff was optioned to the minors. He'd been kind of going through a little bit of a slump, and I think the way that this timing is going to work is that they're just going to wait for the time that they can call him up again, because I think you have to stay down in the minors for like 15 days after getting optioned down. So he probably has the minimum stay in the minors. It's partially why Luis Urias was added to the major league roster for the Athletics after returning from injury. But yeah, Geloff currently in the minors. Christian Encarnacion Strand surprisingly also optioned to the minors. He had not necessarily been doing super well, but it is surprising that they decided to send him down to AAA instead of letting him work it out in the majors. And then, like we mentioned, Richard Fitz also back in the major league rotation for the Red Sox. All right, that is it for injury news and notes. We are going to, instead of covering essentially 3 days of games in the All-Star break. Instead, we're going to talk about a couple hitters and pitchers who either had poor or really good first half of the seasons, and then try to figure out, what does their outlook look like in the second half of the season. And so, Patrick, yeah, I think we're going to start with you. And who do you have as your surging hitter of the first half?
Yeah, I'll kick it off with Tigers outfielder Riley Greene. He 95 games, so everyday guy in the non-mathematical first half of the season. 397 plate appearances, 53 runs, 24 homers, 78 RBIs, a steal, and a 284 average. So super strong, four category contribution so far from Greene, who I think was going like right outside the top 100 in ADP. He's a former highly touted prospect who had a decent year last year, but now he's really putting it all together, at least from a fantasy perspective. One of the kind of weird things, or what you could say is a wart in his profile, is the strikeout rate, 31.5%, compared with only a 6.8% walk rate. So it's kind of weird to see someone hitting 284 with that kind of strikeout rate and this much power. I will say the strikeout rate, it's supported by a bad contact rate, 68% on our player pages, which is in the 12th percentile. I think we count foul tips as whiffs, so that rate is a little lower than you'd see other places. And looking at his rolling process plus charts, it's like the power is so fantastic and the swing decisions are just okay that it outweighs his just below average contact skills. He's really just able to consistently produce because of how much power he has. And actually, I read an article from Michael Rosen on Fangraphs a couple weeks ago about Riley Greene, talking about how he has a bad squared up rate, which basically means it's based on bat speed and the pitch speed. And it's like, did you get to 80% of the max possible exit velocity based on those two factors? And Riley Greene's in the first percentile in that. So he does not consistently square up the ball, but that's okay because he has a high barrel rate. And when he does square up the ball, he's almost the most likely in the league to turn it into barrels. So he's really making the most of, the solid contact he's making. And he's also a guy who, when the new swing tilt metrics came out from StatCast, he has like the sweetest swing tilt in the league. So that's in terms of his bat angle coming through the zone. So that's gonna be a power heavy, but also strikeout heavy approach. But it seems like it's working for him so far, right? Like I said, he's been one of the most valuable players in the league so far. We have him at 18th on Scott Chu's hitter list, which is kind of a rest of season hitter ranking. So that's, I believe, right below Jackson Chourio and right above Vladdy Jr. Could be the other way around, but right in between those two guys. So really high praise. Do you see him as like that 18th guy? Do you think he fits in, or do you think maybe he should be knocked down a tier 2? Where are you at on Greene?
I feel like all the underlying metrics, right, like bat speed, barrel rate, hard hit rate, all kind of scream that like what's happening right now is true, right? Like it's expected, so to speak, right? It's not like this is all of a sudden out of nowhere. I mean, I think the barrel rate jumping from 13% to 70% is kind of crazy. But I mean, he's maintained that the entire season. We're well into the point where barrel rate should be sticky. So it is kind of impressive that despite the fact that he strikes out that much, he's barreling the ball that much as well, which is pretty impressive. it's kind of funny because I think we've always thought of him as just like a really decent like 30 home run hitter, and he's gonna hit 30 home runs in like probably the next month or so. Would not be surprised if he somehow gets to 40, and he's doing all of this with the 284 average. I don't know. Just part of me just seems like he's doing all of this despite the fact that the strikeout rate's high. Like the strikeout rate just can't get worse, you know. So to me, it seems like the Riley Green that we're seeing right now is the one that we should expect for the rest of the season. Nothing out of the normal stats that I look at seems weird. Like the home run per five ball rate's kind of weird, but that's just how his season's been going. 365 BABIP is not that egregious, especially because he plays in Comerica too. Like that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I don't know. It feels real mainly because like none of the stats are jumping out to me as like this isn't sustainable for at least another 60 games.
Yeah, yeah, I'm generally with you. I do think this is a legit breakout. I think, like you said, the BABIP is high, but he has a high career BABIP and he hits the ball super hard. So it's not the type of thing where you just pencil him in for a 300 BABIP because that's not the type of profile that he offers. I think the RBI pace is probably a little unsustainable, right? He's on like 125 to 130 RBI pace. And I know that the Tigers have a good offense, way better than years past, but I don't think that that's necessarily going to keep up. And I also think he's probably more of a 260 to 270 true talent hitter. So I think he's just a tiny bit out over his skis, but it's not like a panic, you need to sell now type thing. So I'm looking at the hitter list. I think I'd have him more in the 20s. Like I'm looking, that's like Manny Machado, Ketel Marte, Brent Rooker, Bryce Harper, Seiya Suzuki, like those type of guys. I think he fits in really well with that like mid 20s group. It's honestly been a super similar season to Seiya Suzuki so far. Bunch of home runs and a ton of RBIs. I guess his average is a little better, but I think that they're pretty comparable. So obviously he's been great. I think I'd knock him down just a few spots, but I don't really have too many bad things to say about him.
Yeah, I mean, and the one thing you could maybe point to the fact is like the strikeout rate went up and his walk rate went down. So essentially, he's just been trying to get at more balls, and it's kind of shown that his O swing rate's actually up 7%. So he really is, it might be that he doesn't have the greatest eye at the plate, but it also might be like he just thinks that he can maybe get to those pitches that are more on the fringes a little bit more, and he's willing to chase that type of power, and it's resulting in higher strikeouts, less walks, but everything else is kind of staying the same when he makes contact with the bat.
Yeah, there might be some ugly slumps because of the strikeout heavy nature, but I think you just got to stick with him.
Yeah. Well, another outfielder that I want to highlight who's been having a really good season, almost a little bit out of nowhere, to be honest, is Andy Pages. 93 games, 378 play appearances, so very similar to Greene. He's an everyday player. 45 runs, 59 RBI. 17 homers and 18 stolen bases, slashing 285, 325, 479. The one caveat here is that halfway through July, it's not been a good month for Pages. He's only hit one homer. He's had 3 runs and 4 RBI in 12 games, slashing 244, 306, 333. If you look at his process plus, it really peaked in late June. It's kind of been steadily declining ever since. Part of that is due to the fact that his decision value is pretty much just cratering from MLB average to the 10th percentile. If you look at his Statcast numbers, his chase rate's in the 10th percentile as well. So he's really trying to go after pitches. And part of that, I think, is he's just become steadily more and more aggressive with his swings. His swing aggression has just slowly gone up over the season to the point where he's at, I think, in the 90th percentile there. Again, like in terms of where he's batting in the Dodger lineup, he's batting 5 through 7. There was that one crazy day where he batted second, but he's consistently kind of been in the second half of the order, occasionally batting fourth as well. The weird thing with Pages, though, is that his underlying stats aren't that great. He's below league average in average exit velocity. He's in barrel rate, in hard hit rate. All those numbers don't really seem to indicate that he's really that much of a power hitter. He does have an above average pull rate in the air at 18.4% this season, which actually he's kind of been consistently pretty decent at that. Last year it was at 20%. So he's at least good at like getting the ball in the air when he's trying to pull it. So June was clearly the hot month for him. He had 6 homers in that month. I think his slugging was well above 500. And the thing, though, is that obviously if that's the high water mark, the next high water mark for him was, March and April. He was slashing 292, 370, 521. So, more numbers that are kind of in line with where his season was at. are his June numbers where again he had that above 300 average, above 500 slugging. Are those numbers where we kind of expect him to be, or is he really going to be back where we expect him in, let's just say May or July, where the numbers just are down and just not really that great?
Yeah, I think the June and him, I imagine he was in the top 50 players at some point by auction, by earned value. I think
Oh,
that
for sure.
that kind of set too high of a bar for what to expect from him. Hopefully it's found money, right? In a lot of cases, unless you're playing in a really deep league with Pahe, so you can't get too frustrated to see a slump like this. I add him in a 16 team league off waivers. I traded him for Matt Chapman in like May, and I was like, this is a great deal. And then Andy Paz becomes a superstar, and Matt Chapman gets hurt. I'm sitting here like, well, what just happened? So, he's always a talented prospect, kind of like a back end of the top 100 guy. But mostly just because of the whole package, not necessarily because he's just a fantastic hitter. So I think that, what we've seen from him so far, the whole body of work could be what he looks like, in his prime. He's still pretty young. I think there's going to be a little bit more regression this year, but I think that his profile is kind of like a guy who's a quiet, slightly above average contributor in every category. He's going to hit, he's hitting 285 right now, but he's probably going to hit more like 260, 265. He's showing more speed this year, which is great. And obviously the power's there, and he plays for the Dodgers, right? Even if he's not hitting in a premium lineup spot, if he's hitting 5 through 7, the runs and the RBIs are going to be there. So I think he's going to be like a steady, quiet contributor type. He might get a little overdrafted next year if he ends up with like a crazy end of season line, which would be unfortunate. But if he kind of sputters out a little bit, it might be, a nice. You might have the option to kind of buy low a little bit next draft season.
Yeah, I don't know if 30-15 is in his future this season, only because I don't know if he's going to get to 30
Mm-hmm.
home runs. Partially because, that would imply that the months that he had in June and in March are going to happen more often, where he's going to hit, 6 homers or something like that, as opposed to, just like 3 or 4. But yeah, the speed I think is nice to see. He's got 72nd percentile sprint speed, I believe. That's what Statcast has him at. So, yeah, he is kind of a really decent 5 tool guy, where like he could really sit in pretty well as like a really good outfielder 3. Even though his production this season has been more of like an outfielder 2 or a fringe outfielder 1. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
One thing that gives me a little bit of pause is like the chase that you're talking about. So on our pages, right, 37% chase rate, which is 11th percentile. And then his zone rate's in the 84th percentile. So pitchers are feeding him pitches in the zone way above average, even though he's chasing constantly. So I think that once he got on this heater, I'd like to think that pitchers, they became a little bit more worried about him, and hopefully they figure, we really don't need to throw this guy that many pitches in the zone until he shows that he can lay off. So I think
mhm.
that might, kind of expose his batting average floor a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of makes sense, because looking at the Statcast page, it was kind of weird to be like, his chase rate is terrible, but his whip
Yeah.
rate's actually like decent. Like uh, he just really goes after pitches that are just outside the zone, I guess. Much to his inability to hit those pitches, I guess. But yeah, it's his decision value for sure. This just in the past month has just been awful, and I think maybe that's kind of what you were talking about, that being scouted a little bit. Pitchers kind of know what to go at him with, and he's now kind of really, facing the full brunt of how good Major League pitching can probably be.
Yeah. And he had super high walk rates in the minor leagues, but maybe that was just because guys were pitching around him because of the power rather than like, he had a great eye or anything like that.
Yeah.
So transitioning over from a couple guys who have been flying high to the struggling hitters side. Mine is a shortstop who signed a big contract this offseason. That's Willy Adames of the Giants. In 96 games, he has 408 plate appearances, so huge volume. But the numbers other than volume are a little bit lackluster. 53 runs, 12 homers, 48 RBI, and 4 steals, and a 220 average, which is really kind of his weakest category, definitely dragging you down. This isn't necessarily a terrible fantasy season because, he's been an everyday guy and isn't a complete zero in any category except the negative average. But he was a guy who was going right, I think, just inside the top 100, and he had a huge season last year with his walk year in Milwaukee. He went over 30-20, over 90 runs at 110 RBI with a solid batting average. So he's taken a step back in every single department. And that's come even though there's seemingly no changes really in his swing decisions or his batted ball profile. Still walking about 11% of the time, striking out 26% of the time. So strikeouts are definitely a part of his game. His swing strike rate is a little bit lower. And then his barrel rate, fly ball rate, line drive rate, all that stuff is about the same. So the only kind of big change I saw when I was looking through his profile is a 7 percentage point drop in pull air rate. I think it's from 24 to 17%. So that's a pretty significant drop. And then also, something I was worried about before the season, I kind of faded him, was San Francisco. I know it's worse for lefties than righties, but when you look at StatCast's, X home runs based on park, he has 12 actual home runs, right, but only 10 expected homers in San Francisco versus 14 in Milwaukee. So Milwaukee maybe, doing him some favors there. And he's been bumped down to fifth in the lineup against a lot of righties instead of second and third. Still hits third against lefties at least. He's been heating up in the last 30 days with the 805 OPS, but still, ugly season-long numbers. But do we see the last 30 days as a sign of things to come, or do we feel like it's just going to be overall, pretty down year for Willie?
Yeah, I mean, venue change is obviously something that he has to deal with, and I think we've seen a little bit of the evidence of that. But it is kind of funny. I was like thinking, like, yeah, San Francisco's not that terrible for a righty, especially if he's a guy who's pulling it in the air as much as Adames is. Yeah, it just seems like maybe just a down year for him. Like even as good as last season has been at 30 to 20, he's been kind of consistently in the mid 20s to 24, 31, 25. Those were his home run totals from 2023 to 2021. So the fact that he's only at 12 this season is a little surprising. And I think the fact that his average is this low this year is also a little worrisome. But I think it just takes some time to get reacclimated to a team. Obviously, the Giants are a little bit of a team in flux too, having just traded for Rafael Devers. So I'm sure they're trying to figure out how to build the team around him. I'm curious how his hard contact numbers have changed throughout the seasons. I mean, I'm just kind of looking at some of his numbers. It doesn't seem like he's making any less hard contact this season compared to how he has been in previous years. So yeah, it's a little confusing for why this year has been so down, because all of his numbers look about the same. That And I think to me that means that maybe what we've seen in the last 30 days is real, and that he's going to kind of get back to the player that, maybe not the player he was last year, but kind of the player that we usually expect Adames to be, where, he's kind of in the mid 200s in terms of average, pretty decent pop. And that still is going to play in most fantasy leagues.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing about it, is that you can't point to one thing. Obviously, the pull air rate drop is a little concerning, but that can't explain all of this. I think it's just the type of thing where last year was a career year. This year is one of his worst years, and the truth is just somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
The 21 steals last year, he'd never had double digits before. Maybe he's trying to steal more because it's his walk year, show that he's a well-rounded player, that type of thing. So clearly it's more realistic to expect 8 to 10 going forward. And yeah, he's a career 245 hitter with a 757 OPS. So he's more of an accumulator. You could argue that playing in Tampa early in his career, I know he talked about how he just could not see the ball in Tampa. So maybe that's weighing down his career numbers a little bit. But yeah, I think last year it set a little bit of an unrealistic expectation for him. Not to mention he played in 161 games and had 688 plate appearances. Like that's a max season.
Yeah, one really interesting thing to note: the Giants are fourth worst in the league in terms of total stolen bases, so they might also be a team that just doesn't necessarily run. Now, granted, it's not necessarily a team full of really slow dudes. There's some fast dudes on that team, but they might just as a team strategy just choose not to steal bases compared to other teams. So that might be a reason for the why we're seeing the steal numbers kind of being similar to where he was in previous years in his career compared to last year.
Yeah. Jung-Hoo Lee hasn't really run as much as I was expecting. And then last year, Matt Chapman ran wild out of nowhere in his first year with the Giants. And then this year, definitely less aggressive. So maybe it is a philosophical thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. All right, another hitter who kind of in a similar spot as Adames, where the numbers don't look terrible, but maybe they're just not meeting expectations, is ONEIL CRUZ. 85 games, 360 plate appearances, 16 homers, 49 runs, 37 RBI, 29 steals, but a 212, 319, 414 slash line. You look at those numbers and you're like, hey, that's actually pretty solid. 16 homers, 29 steals, right? Like that. This is a guy who's probably going to have a 30-30 season or at least, 25-30 season. But I don't know. I still think Cruz is a little bit of a struggling hitter. He's got a 212 average. He's got a 32% strikeout rate. The slash line just isn't great for a guy who's got 16 homers. Like the fact that he's only got a 414 slug is actually feels kind of low to me for a guy who has that many homers. And partially, I will admit, maybe it's because I'm expecting too much from Cruz. I thought that maybe the strikeout rate would go down this season. It's actually gone up. He's actually increased his walk rate from 8.5% to 13.1%. So he's certainly more useful in OBP league. So, but if you have him in a 5x5 league, that average, I mean, we just talked about how Adames wasn't doing that great at 220. Cruz at 212, that's just not helpful whatsoever. Also, the fact that he's just on a really bad Pirates team, right? Those runs and RBI numbers are just so much lower than all the peers that he's getting drafted around. One of the players I looked at as a comparison was Elly De La Cruz, which is a little bit unfair, right? Elly was drafted in the first round. ONEIL Cruz is getting drafted more in like the third or fourth round. So obviously you expect Elly to be having a great year, but Elly actually has cut his strikeout rate by a ton this season. So he's actually shown some of the work that he's put in to kind of basically not be a 30+% strikeout machine. He's I think he's down to 20% or something ridiculous like that. The process numbers are fine. He's hovering around 115 for the season, going up a little bit, going down a bit. But almost all that is coming from his insane power numbers. Decision value is just way below league average. I think it's sitting at 10% right now. Contact ability is just starting to creep back to above 25th percentile. So if you just look at the makeup of Cruz, it's a really flawed hitter. He's got really incredible power. He's got really good speed. But the team context and his inability to make good decisions at the plate really limits the help that he can provide in a standard 5x5 league. Despite how fast he is, if he just isn't getting on base, the steals, even though he's got 29 of them, like maybe it could be higher. The power numbers are, fine, but unfortunately, he's just striking out a ton. And because none of his teammates are getting on base or batting him in, the counting stats, in terms of runs at RBI aren't that great. So I don't know. Is Cruz a guy that is playing pretty much where you think he'd be at, or is this kind of the guy that we expected? Maybe it's unfair to Cruz and to, I guess, fantasy managers to expect more from him at this point.
Yeah, I mean, he continues to be one of the most kind of mystifying players in fantasy. If someone told you ONEIL Cruz is going to have 29 stolen bases by the All-Star break, you'd say, great, he's going to return first-round value. And instead, he's the 40th overall hitter when he was going at like pick 35. So it's so hard to project a guy like this who he's kind of just an alien. Like he has outlier tools, but also outlier flaws, right? He's chasing less this year, which you'd think is good, but it's because he's just swinging less. He's letting pitches in the zone go by too. And when you're not swinging often and you are one of the worst hitters in the league and making contact, I mean, the power rate, I mean, the strikeout rate is just going to skyrocket, and the batting average floor is just going to be so low. So, I mean, I think that I think with how hard he hits the ball, it's unlikely that he continues running this low of a BABIP and a batting average, but I mean, I can't confidently say he's going to stay on a 50 steal pace, right? Like it's just so hard to know, what direction to go with a guy like this. And obviously the Pirates are just a putrid offense. So it's the same thing. I mean, Brian Reynolds has been a lot worse than ONEIL Cruz, right? But like the same thing he's dealing with is that the floor becomes a lot lower when you're in an offense like this. So yeah, it's confusing. I would say it would be nice to buy low on ONEIL Cruz next year, but I feel like it's impossible to ever buy low on this guy. I think people are always going to be excited about him. So yeah, I think, you haven't had a complete, loss here. He's not a complete drain. So you're okay with what you're getting, even though you wanted more. I'd never draft him, and I just don't feel confident, ever doing it.
Yeah. Earlier this season in one of my leagues, I traded Brent Rooker and Clay Holmes for ONEIL Cruz, which at the time, like ONEIL was just like stealing bases like none other. It's a league with weird categories where we have both average and OPS. And I was like, well, the OBP is looking great for O'Neill, and the slugging should only get higher. But the fact that like he's got an OPS under 800, which is like it doesn't make sense for a guy like who has his skills to have an OPS over under 800. So obviously, Brent Rooker has been decent. He hasn't been like a star or anything, but I think probably the problem is that CRUZ just has not been able to be above league average, I guess, in anything other than steals
Mhm.
right now. So obviously the home run numbers are nice, but you kind of expect that from a premium guy like him. So yeah, it's just it's a little frustrating. I wish he was better, and yet you look at that line, you're like, that's still not terrible, at least.
Yeah, I just realized we talked about back-to-back guys I had on my shortstop bust list going into the season. So I guess I mean, O'Neal Cruz hasn't been terrible, but that's 2 for 2 right there. And then I have
Right.
Xavier Edwards, which I would say is a win so far, but then Ceddanne Rafael, that's definitely a loss. So 3 out of 4, not
Three
too
out of
bad so
four.
far,
Yeah,
knock
that's
on
not
wood.
bad. Yeah.
So on what are we going to now? The surging pitcher side.
Yep.
This is my guy here, Kris Bubic of the Royals, left-handed pitcher. He's gone 108.2 innings, 113 strikeouts with 7 wins, 2.48 ERA, very, very pristine, 1.16 whip, decent, but not quite as sparkling. And then a 17.9% strikeout minus walk rate. That's always something I like to look at with pitchers. Bubic, it's been an up and down career for him. He had like a quote unquote mini breakout in 2023 before he blew out his elbow. Came back last year, was really solid for a couple of months in the bullpen. And now he's just been fantastic all year in the rotation for the Royals. He is kind of a command over stuff type guy, but he has 3 really nice off speed pitches, a sweeper, a slider, and changeup that get really good results for him. Sweeper and the slider, both 30% CSW. He does throw the sweeper to both handedness, which is interesting. Slider a little bit more for lefties, I think. And then the changeup, which he mostly throws to righties, but not exclusively. 21.7% swing strike rate and a 44.3% chase rate. Those are both elite marks. So he mixes in a lot of pitches, kind of keeps guys on their toes. Some inning concerns here, I would say. He's had at least one season with more innings than this, but barely threw in 23 and only threw around 35 to 40 innings in 2024. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle him, right? Because he's going to take on a huge workload. The Royals are sort of in it, sort of not in the playoff race. But at the same time, he's a free agent after next season. So it's not like a Drew Rasmussen type situation or Garrett Crochet last year where they're super invested in the guy long term. So maybe they just let him go. We've got him 29th on the list right now. So in terms of rest of season outlook, I think I'm a little lower than 29th on Bubic. I just have a little bit of concern about the volume and do expect a little bit of ERA regression, but you're obviously, it's a huge win here. This was a late dart throw or even a waiver ad for a lot of people.
Yeah, Bubic was a waiver ad for me in my home
Nice.
league, and I've been pretty happy about that for this season. Yeah, the whip is weirdly high, 1.16. I mean, I know it's not egregiously high, but usually I think the mark we'd like to keep our pitches under is like 1.2. But that ERA is really good. The the stuff in terms of like getting swinging strikes is really good. CSW is really good. I mean, like everything kind of points to this being somewhat real. None of the weird numbers stand out as like awful. Like a 301 BABIP, that's not that out of place. 79% left on base rate, like a little high, but not high enough to really draw any concern. Um, yeah, and like you said, all his pitches are like pretty decent. And they're getting really decent CSW numbers on them. That it's kind of those 4 pitches that he's got, right? The four seamer, sweeper, changeup, slider, are all really solid. The slider, I think, has maybe sometimes mixed results in terms of where it is day in day out, but for the most part, like at least season long, the pitch is really good. So yeah, to me, it feels real. I think similarly, those volume concerns are probably something to be careful about. Like even in the previous seasons, right? He never got above 130 innings. So the fact that he's already at 108 is probably a little concerning. But I would be surprised if he doesn't get at least a couple more games in him where he might be able to get to 150, 160 innings, something like that. Also, one thing to say: 11 quality starts in 18 games. That's really impressive. So, the very consistent. I don't see any reason to fade Bubic. Like, I agree, maybe he should be a little bit lower just because of the volume concerns. But if you were just telling me that Bubic is going out to pitch tomorrow, I'd feel good about starting him against anyone.
Yeah, yeah. The only thing that jumps out to me in terms of regression is the home run to fly ball rate. We define fly ball a little differently, I think, at Pitcher List. So it's 10.5% on our site, which is 93rd percentile, but it's like 6% on Fangraphs. So that's well below league average. So, but what does that cause the ERA to jump to? Like 3? That's still awesome. So yeah, I don't have a ton of concerns about him. I think if you are in a league that has playoffs and you're going to make the playoffs, maybe you want to start listening to offers on him. But if it's just like a roto league, I think that you can just continue riding him out.
Yeah. Another pitcher that has been really solid this year and kind of under the radar for me. Unfortunately, I did not really see somebody he was having this good of a season. Matthew Boyd, 111.2 innings, 102 strikeouts. He's currently 10-3. He's got a 2.34 ERA, 1.03 WHIP, and an 18% K minus BB rate. So, the walk rate's really stellar for him, 5.2%. I think the challenging thing for me when I look at Boyd, and this is kind of similar to Bubic, is that we really have nothing to compare this season against. The last time he threw over 80 innings in a season was 2019. Not that he was a much different pitcher back then, but it's been 6 years since that point. So it's hard to be like, oh, he's doing better than his career. He's doing worse than his career because we just have no idea what his career numbers are. Left on base rate, a little concerning at 81%, but it's very similar to Bubic numbers, so it's not where I'm like, oh, that's really awful. He's doing a good job of limiting homers, so a little bit of the same formula too here. None of his pitches are what I would consider stellar. The changeup might be the best of the bunch at 30.7% CSW. He does steal a bunch of strikes with his curveball. The fastball's all right. Like none of his pitches stand up like, oh yeah, that's a standout pitch. And that probably makes sense for who Boyd is at this point in his career, I believe. In the most recent iteration of the list, he was at 39th, which is, kind of makes sense. Really good stats, but maybe there's not a lot of faith in how he can continue with these numbers. But yeah, rest of the season, how do we feel about Boyd? Does he kind of stay in the mid twos ERA with a really low WHIP? The strikeout numbers aren't incredible. I think he's at like 23%, but they're good enough to get by. And so obviously the 10 wins is nice playing for, the Cubs, who are the second best team in the National League. So that helps a little bit. But yeah, how do we feel about Boyd? And do we expect, I don't know, regression to some mean that none of us know?
Yeah, it kind of seems like the year of like a lefty. I've heard on a couple of podcasts lately that the league is just hitting lefties way worse than they're hitting righties this year, or at least like, an OPS gap that's enough to seem meaningful. So a lot of, Bubic and Boyd, right? You got Max Fried, like, there's just a lot of lefties having great seasons. I like Boyd. I think more than Bubic, honestly. I think at rest of season, I would take Boyd over him, not because he's going to have a better ERA. I think Bubic maybe has a slight edge there, but I think the whip's going to be a little better, and I think the win chances will be better. Maybe they're even in a quality starts league. I imagine Boyd's benefiting a lot from PCA, covering so much ground in center field. He is have a slight fly ball tilt, so that's definitely a plus for him. And yeah, it's definitely a sum of his parts type thing. Like Bubic, I was looking at his year over year changes. His fastball's up almost a tick and a half, and his changeup is down 2 ticks. And those are his 2 most thrown pitches. So I imagine that the velo difference at this point is like almost 15 miles per hour. So, I think that he's probably just absolutely carving righties up with those 2 pitches. And, that's just a big adjustment to make, not to mention the couple other off-speed pitches that he sprinkles in there. So, yeah, I mean, I don't have any shares, but I'm definitely, a believer. I'm sure he's going to get overdrafted next year. He's still an injury prone, 35-year-old starting pitcher. But I think the rest of this year, yeah, I think he's just gonna keep doing his thing.
Yeah, I remember when Boyd came up in the majors, and it was like this guy. It's like Detroit somehow found another ace. That's so frustrating. Of course, he unfortunately was starting to deal with injuries kind of later in his career, but yeah, it's been nice to see a little bit of resurgence for him, even as a 34-year-old.
Yeah, I mean, he just couldn't avoid the long ball when he was younger, and it seems like he's doing that this year. 7% homer to fly ball rate might not be sustainable like Bubic, but his fly ball exit velocity is 88, which is in the 92nd percentile. So it's a little bit of contact management. It's not just pure luck going on.
Yeah, he's got 13 quality starts and 19 total.
Mm.
It's funny you talk about the home run rate because I was just looking at his old numbers and like 2018. I throw out any number in 2019 in terms of homers because I just can't trust it. But
Yeah.
2018, 1.43 home runs per nine. This season he does 0.81. And he was playing in Detroit in 2018, and he's playing in Wrigley in 2025, and none of those numbers make sense in how he's suppressing those homers. So, yeah, just really impressive season from Boyd, and yeah, I hope it continues for him.
Yeah, absolutely. On the other side of the spectrum is Dylan Cease, right? I think he's kind of the number one talked about, struggling starting pitcher this year. Drafted super high, and it's just been a pure disappointment everywhere besides his strikeouts. He's thrown 103 innings with 129 strikeouts, which is top 10 in the league, but everything else is bad. 3-9, 4.88 ERA, 1.33 WHIP. So those aren't just slightly below average. Those are really dragging you down, especially in a year that hasn't been like dominated by the pitcher, but ratios have been pretty low. And a 20.2% strikeout minus walk rate, which is borderline elite. So it's kind of weird to see this bad of ratios with Cease while he's still getting a ton of whiffs and not, he's walking guys, but not at a crazy clip. And it is a little bit puzzling. It's come with, maybe it's kind of similar to Willie Adames, I guess. It's come with no drop off and stuff. He's actually getting more swings and misses. And two of his last three seasons were fantastic with this same stuff. So it's a little weird to see. The BABIP doesn't jump out, but it is a little bit higher than his career, 320 versus 293. But his ERA at 4.88 is worse than all of his ERA estimators by at least a run. However, I do think that sometimes guys who only throw two pitches, which is basically what Cease does, he throws his fastball and slider 90% of the time. I do think sometimes they underperform their ERA estimators, kind of like a Spencer Strider type guy. And he really just struggles against lefties. It's something that he's always had to deal with in his career, which I guess isn't surprising since his secondary is a slider. He for his career, there's a 35-point WOBA difference between righties and lefties and a 6 percentage point gap in strikeout minus walk rate. So the lefty thing is just something that he hasn't been able to figure out, and maybe that's why he continues to underperform. I do believe he has a couple of really nice starts lined up out of the break if the rotations break the way that we expect them to. He's supposed to start Friday, so that's tomorrow when we're recording, at the Nats, and then next week at the Marlins. So if he's going to get going, now's going to be the time. I'm honestly, Cease is 32nd on the list compared to BUBIC 29th and Boyd like 39th or whatever you said. I'm taking Cease out of the bunch. I might, come off as the BUBIC hater by the end of this podcast, but I just think that Cease, he's going to have the volume edge on both of those guys, and the strikeouts are going to pile up. And I do have faith in him to, return to not necessarily, Cy Young contender form, but just a really solid kind of SP2 form.
Yeah, weird stat about his slider. It's got a 20% home run per fly ball rate this season. Again, that's not good. And in terms of how many fly balls he's giving up, it's giving about the same as previous years. So basically, he's more or less doubled the number of homers that he's given up on his slider this season. And
that tells me that people are sitting on it.
Yeah, it's getting up there in terms of that's how his ERA is getting up. Like in terms of counts, like he's using it about as often as he has before in terms of two strike counts. But yeah, it just isn't working this year. I'm not really the stuff guru when it comes to stuff like this, but I don't know. He's the IVB on a slider, which I don't even know how valuable that is to know, but it's a little bit higher. It's basically ending up a little bit higher in the zone because he's been consistently around like 0, right? It's 0.4, 0.5 inches, minus 0.8 the last 3 seasons. This year, 1.2 inches. So it's I don't know, not dropping as much as it has before. I guess might be the way to interpret that. Yeah, I don't know. He's maybe just lost some stuff on the slider. I mean, that pitch was disgusting, right? It was, I think for many years running, right? That pitch was one of the best pitches in baseball, and it's just maybe lost a little bit stuff on it. Weirdly, the velocity's gone up, so I wonder if he's made a change with that too, with how he's using that pitch. But yeah,
I guess the increase in the rise, kind of makes sense when you think of the increased velocity, but that might make the pitch profile more like a cutter, which isn't a
Hmm.
traditional swing and miss pitch. So, when it's a pitch you're trying to bury in the bottom of the zone, I think an inch or two can definitely make a difference in terms of getting a swing and miss or a foul ball or even a barrel. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was the funny thing about last season, where it was like um, Nick wanted Cease to add a cutter
mhm.
super hard, right? Because he's got a 97 mile an hour fastball. He's got an 87 mile an hour slider. The cutter is like a perfect bridge pitch to use there. He barely used the cutter last season, 0.5%. But the slider is kind of very similar. It's gone up a tick basically, and so it's it is kind of interesting how some of these small adjustments might be resulting in some worse numbers for Cease.
Yeah, it might be the type of thing, he needs to tinker with the pitch shape in the offseason. He's just not going to quite be the same guy until then. I think he's obviously going to improve on the ratios. It's not going to be this bad all season, but it's going to be disappointing. But maybe we can buy low next year. That'd be pretty fun.
Yeah, be a big fan of that. If it's just one pitch, that's kind of his issue.
Yeah.
All right, another pitcher who this probably is the second worst guy compared to Cease, the one who's not dealing with any injury and just is horrible, and that's Tanner Bibee. 109 innings, 95 strikeouts. He's 5-9 this season, 4.29 ERA, 1.2 for WHIP, 13.6% K minus BB rate. I believe he's like in the 70s on Nick's list, 77th, I should say, despite being the 30th pitcher taken in drafts this year based on NFBC ADP. The ERA obviously is the one that sticks out, right? Like, Cease's was bad. Tanner's isn't as bad, but it's still not great. 4.29 ERA. That's also not helped by his 1.4 home runs per nine. He's dropped to a 20.8% strikeout rate. Last two seasons, he was at 26% in 2024, 24% in 2023. So the numbers have kind of gone down for him in terms of just being able to get strikeouts. The weird part is that he has really decent CSW numbers. He's 69th percentile, right? It wouldn't necessarily scream like that are the numbers of a really terrible pitcher. But his put away rate is down to 16.5%. That's in the 29th percentile. So he's getting the two strikes, but he just can't get any strikeouts after that, or meaningful strikeouts after that. It's not that he's not striking out anyone. His fastball shape has taken a little bit of a hit, losing about an inch in IVP, where it basically went from above league average to below league average. It wasn't necessarily a great pitch shape to start out with, but now it's a little bit worse. He's dropped the usage on that pitch in favor of adding a sinker. The sinker's fine, but the problem is it still misses a lot and actually gets hammered for homers as well. So, not really the greatest adjustment to switch to a pitch that people can really take for a ride. So, I guess the question is, do we expect any improvement from Bibee? Obviously, Cleveland, great pitching machine, but I don't know what they can do necessarily during the season. Do we expect him to improve at all, or is he kind of what we're going to see for this season? And maybe we're kind of hoping for some offseason adjustments from Bibee.
Yeah, this one is super unfortunate just because he basically had two full seasons coming into this year of just being a solid, ratio stabilizing mid rotation pitcher. So, you draft him hoping that's what you're getting. And instead, he's kind of just been a slight negative across the board. The fastball stuff is definitely concerning. I go back to a couple months ago, we talked about Max Meyer and how he made some really nice arsenal changes, but his fastball is just downright bad. And I think that can really kind of limit what a pitcher is able to do. The fastballs, there's more off-speed pitches getting thrown than probably ever before in baseball, but fastball is still the foundation of a starter's arsenal. So, those subtle shape changes I think are making a big difference for Bibee, and I do think they've kind of lowered his floor and his ceiling a little bit. I still have a little bit of like implicit trust in Cleveland to right the ship with him to some extent. But yeah, it doesn't seem like either the sinker or the four seamer is kind of his, foundational pitch to build everything else around. So as a result, I think we're still going to see those outings, where he does get hit hard. I think he'll chip away at the ratios. Maybe he'll end the season with like a 4 and a 1.2, which isn't going to kill you, but definitely not what you paid for. So a little bit of a red flag. And yeah, I might be a little hesitant to buy in next year if I don't see, a fastball that he's able to really rely on.
Yeah, I mean, just some context. His POV on the fastball the last two seasons, and I generally like to trust stuff metrics when it comes to fastballs because I think we kind of know what's going on there. A little bit below league average in terms of his PLV on his fastball this year, 11th percentile. Right, it's just not a good pitch. He's kind of intermixing the usage with the four seamer and the sinker as the main pitch, and then the cutter and the sweeper and his changeup are kind of the pitches that help out afterwards. But yeah, the four seamer just this year has been not very good, and it's being replaced by a pitch that also isn't very good. So, not a great recipe for success, unfortunately.
Yeah, maybe the cutter is something he can lean on a little bit more in the future and kind of build things around that. But yeah, it's definitely a little bit concerning.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is it for those player updates. Obviously, hopefully, some of these guys do end up improving this season, and for the ones that are good right now, I mean, hopefully they stay where they are. And yeah, the second half of the season's just starting. Obviously, still a lot of baseball left. Uh, you mentioned roto leagues, right? We still have got 2 full months of that to go. So, yeah, plenty of fantasy baseball to still be happening. But let's look to next week specifically with streamers, which is going to be really tough because schedules are not out yet. But yeah, Patrick, who do we've got for some potential streamers next week?
Yep, have to throw a little bit of darts here just because all the rotations aren't out yet. Just to recap from a couple of weeks ago, we didn't have any streamers last week going into the break, but we had a couple guys from 2 weeks ago who got their second starts. They both got wins, which is nice. Nick Martinez went 5 1/3 and Rocky Road, 2 earned, 1.13 whip, and 3 Ks. Ryan Bayo had a second great start of the week, 6 1/3, 1 earned, 0.95 whip, and 5 Ks. Martinez got lit up the first start, so obviously the second one doesn't wipe it out completely, but at least you got something. And then going to this week, I'm going to go with Yahoo and CBS rostership rates going forward because it seems like CBS is a lot more active than ESPN, so should be a little bit more representative. First one's Tomoyuki Sugano, Orioles, 12% Yahoo, 36% CBS. He's been struggling, after getting off to a great start in his rookie season, but it's all about the matchups here. Two start at Cleveland, at home against Colorado, easily two of the weakest offenses in the league. Strikeout upside isn't super high, right? He's kind of like a 15% strikeout guy. So in your shallower leagues, I think you can stay away. But in deeper leagues, whether it's wins or quality starts, I think he's a good option there. Next one is for this weekend specifically, and it's only a dart throw, if you're desperate for a win or strikeouts or, you just need a body on there on the mound. He's pitching on Sunday. Aaron Savali, the White Sox, 3% Yahoo, 11% CBS. Not a guy whose skills I like, purely a matchup-based play for the weekend. And then another matchup-based play for next week is Logan Allen of the Guardians. He's 19% Yahoo and 18% CBS, so a little bit more, but should be pretty widely available. He gets a two-start, which is at home against Baltimore, and then at the Royals, which aren't – the Royals have been playing better recently, and the Orioles kind of have an average offense, but it's about the handedness, right? We're talking about you're the lefty, and Baltimore and Kansas City are both really weak against lefties all season. They're in the bottom 10 in the league in terms of WRC plus. So I don't love Allen just generally as a pitcher, but I'd like the matchups here. And he's also been in a better groove lately. He's been going, 5 or 6 with 1 or 2 earned pretty consistently. So hopefully he didn't, lose any momentum over the break and he's able to deliver a solid 2-start week.
Yeah, Logan Allen has absolutely been someone who I've been kind of looking at the schedule and figuring out that if he's going to be the guy that I end up picking up next week, just because of how good it looks. Frustratingly for him, though, he just played against the White Sox literally the weekend before the All-Star break and had a really good start, which means that sponsorship is probably going to go up, unfortunately, even if it was against the White Sox. But yeah, he's had a couple really decent starts, and now, like you mentioned, he's got some really good matchups coming up. So yeah, would not be surprised to see him get really targeted over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, the 1.37 whip is very scary, but he's been going well in 3 straight quality starts. I'd be nervous starting him in a playoff matchup, but sometimes you gotta play the volume game. So I wouldn't blame you.
Yeah, it's a 2 week matchup, so usually the ratios usually end up working themselves out. But yeah, the guy just cannot stop walking, guys. Like he consistently has had walked 2 guys every single game for the last 5 starts. So it does not bode well when he's not going to face some more teams and just walk more guys, and you just hope nothing happens with those guys on base.
Yeah, I would definitely give the slight preference to Sugano, even though the lower strikeout ceiling, the matchups are better.
Yeah. All right, well, that is going to be it for this All-Star break version of This Week in Fantasy Baseball. Again, you could find us on Twitter at ThisWeekPL. Send us your comments and questions at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. Of course, you can connect with us on the Discord as well. You can find myself on Twitter at the John Cuh and Patrick at @pfitzgerald_99. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the Pitch List podcast feed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever else you listen to your podcasts, and leave us a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. Lastly, sign up for Pitch List Pro. Again, by doing so, you can join us at the Pitch List Discord, get advice from all the fantasy experts and writers over there, as well as access to some of the content on Pitch List as well. Definitely check that out. And obviously, with the baseball season ramping up again, check us out on Playback as well. We have all the games going on all the time. So yeah, if you've been feeling a little bit drained from not having enough baseball content, that is going to start up again on Friday. So that's all for this week. We'll be back next week with another episode of This Week in Fantasy Baseball. For Patrick, I'm John, and we'll see you in the next one. Later, everyone.